If you're gonna be a freak. Oh, I'm gonna need to get some towels for that. Shoot. If you're gonna be a superhero, you need a good rogues gallery. You look at Spider-Man, he's got Green Goblin, Vulture, Doc Ock. You look at the Flash, he's got Captain Cold, Heatwave, the Reverse Flash. You look at Superman, he's got Metallo, he's got Lex Luthor, he's got General Zod. But I think the best rogues gallery, and I don't think many people will disagree with me here, belongs to Batman. A quick look through the central rogues gallery of Batman can illuminate just what makes this rogues gallery so good. I'm going to be mostly relying on TV and movies just because I'm not super active in the comics, but I will make little references to the comics throughout the video, just as a heads up. But regardless, most of Batman's baddies tend to be more developed and more interesting than the Dark Knight himself. Today we will be taking a tour through Batman's rogues gallery just to determine what makes them the best. Part of the appeal to Batman's villains is that not really many of them are truly evil, making them more sympathetic and identifiable with. Even the most emotionalist, dirty, cold villains are super well developed. Clever transition, I know. Mr. Freeze. We're talking about Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is void of empathy and emotion, yet has become one of the most sympathetic characters in comics. His life was destroyed by a horrific accident that rendered his wife catatonic, and he's dedicated his entire criminal career to saving her. He has a noble cause, but has been so drained of emotion and empathy that he has become one of Batman's most dangerous enemies. He is not afraid to kill people to get what he wants, and he's not afraid to torture people either. He thinks empathy is a weakness instead of a strength. His coldness to humanity juxtaposes with Batman's concern for the preservation of life, creating an engaging conflict between well-established characters. Speaking of bad transitions, next we'll be talking about villains that kind of mirror Batman. First one we're going to start with is Scarecrow. Now, at first glance, you might think, well, there's no way Scarecrow mirrors Batman, because Batman's a bat and Scarecrow's a scarecrow. But, that's a big but, both weaponize fear in order to win conflicts. Batman incorporates fear into his fighting style. That's how he scares criminals. That's why the criminal underworld fears him, because he uses his fear of bats as a symbol of fear for criminals. While Scarecrow uses fear, anyone's fear, not just specifically Scarecrow's. Although, yeah, no. No one's scared of a Scarecrow. Oh my goodness. But Scarecrow uses fear in order to win conflicts, and that's his whole shtick. Both use and weaponize fear in order to win their conflicts. Outside of that, though, Scarecrow's not really a well-developed character. He's a very popular character that's used quite a bit, and the way he uses fear helps develop other characters. We see in Batman the Animated Series that Batman has to overcome his fear of disappointing his dead parents in order to beat Scarecrow. So whenever Scarecrow is introduced into a story, it's usually to help develop other characters based off of their deepest fears. So the next villain we're going to talk about is more of a reflection of Batman, and by reflection I mean straight up copycat. Pun absolutely intended. It's Catman. It's Catman. It's Catman. Okay, so Thomas Blake isn't necessarily straight up Batman. He's more like a combination of Batman and Catwoman, with the name and the concept. Thomas Blake is a super rich guy who dresses up like a cat to commit cat burglaries. The dude even has on and off relationships with superheroes, like Catwoman. I'm not joking either. As of recent, he's developed more into a joke character, kind of like a poor man's Kraven the Hunter who desperately wanted to be Batman but had a thing for cats. But I guess if there's any thematic lesson we can take away from him is that not everyone can be Batman. It's true. We can all have dreams and We can all aspire to be superheroes, but the fact of the matter is that not everyone's cut out for it. Not everyone needs to be imitating Batman jumping off of rooftops trying to fight criminals. Not everyone is athletically, mentally, or financially capable of being Batman. I mean, that's about all I got for him. I kind of thought it was interesting. This guy exists. So now we go from copycats and clones to literally evil Batman. Owlman and Bat-Zaro, I guess, are interesting characters in their own rights. It's neat concepts, and they got well-designed costumes. Fighting Owlman is literally like fighting Batman, but evil and has no qualms with killing people. While Bat-Zaro, along with other Bizarro characters, is a little more sympathetic. He's very stupid and acts like a child, and kind of is mentored by Bizarro, which is kind of sweet. That's about it. There's no real deeper thematic connections there. I guess Owlman would be a representation of who Batman could have become if he was evil, but Bat-Zaro was just kind of there because Bizarro existed and we needed a Bizarro version of every Justice League member. So I was actually surprised when I was reading up on some of Batman's rogues that Killer Moth of all people would fit in this category. Apparently he started out as a dark reflection of Batman. He was going to be the guy who protected criminals while Batman protected the innocent. He was almost like an evil Batman before evil Batman was a concept. Nowadays, he's a bit more of a joke character. He had a memorable appearance in Teen Titans where he was reimagined and redesigned, which I thought looked good. Although I do have a soft spot for his older costume. I think the colors worked well together. But past that, he's a character who had an interesting concept that they could have fleshed out, but instead gave that concept to Owlman, so now he's just the butt of every joke. Now back to characters who reflect Batman who are still good. We have Anarchy. He has incredible intellect and also has sort of a no-killing rule from what I've seen. He doesn't like killing innocent people, just the people he believes deserve it. He goes after those who he believes is guilty of evil in the world, so politicians mainly. Hence his costume persona. He is the Anarchy to this world of order and oppression. He's almost like a younger Batman, but a bit more crazy and a bit more killy, stabby, stabby. He represents what could have happened to Batman if Batman didn't have a tether to reality and a tether to morality in Alfred. Anarchy is almost like an Alfred-less Batman. And it's a really interesting concept, and considering he's a younger guy, he still has a lot more development and evolution to go through, and a lot more to learn about the world, which opens up possibilities for character arcs. Next up, we have a very underrated character that isn't used much but has a very strong fan base, and that's Hush. Thomas Elliot was Bruce Wayne's childhood friend, and from what I have read, he really wanted to be Bruce so much that he killed his own parents. And later he underwent plastic surgery to physically become Bruce. Elliot was more than a match for Bruce. He manipulated Bruce's emotions since he knew where Bruce came from. He was able to pull strings from behind the curtain, but also was able to hold his own in combat, so matching Batman mentally and physically. Elliot is more than a match for Bruce, considering he's a blast from the past, so he's able to tug on those emotions, as well as match him in a fight, and he's just as smart as Bruce, wrapping up to be a very formidable character. It's just a shame that he's not used as much. On the subject of intellect, I think we should go into the series of villains that are able to challenge Batman's intellect, and the first is the Riddler. The Riddler is quite possibly the smartest villain Batman has ever faced. Edward Nygma has set out to prove one thing, that he's the smartest human alive. But I think we all know that the smartest people watch Rick and Morty. Am I right? You gotta have a pretty high IQ to watch that. Am I right? This is why no one respects you, and this is why you have to make videos to put on the internet. This is why you're alone. Anyway, he has an obsessive compulsion to leave clues as to which crimes he'll commit next or where he is. He is the ultimate opponent for Batman's intellect and detective skills. And it's a shame that he's become ridiculed as of recent and become more of a joke character, considering he is really smart and has so much capability to face the Dark Knight. Every single one of his stories becomes a battle of wits as well as smarts, and it's very engaging to watch. If the Riddler isn't Batman's smartest foe, then it'd probably be Ra's al Ghul. Ra's is the guy who taught Batman everything he knows, so it goes without saying that the two would either be partners or enemies. They wound up being enemies. So it goes without saying that Ra's would become one of Batman's greatest foes. He taught Bruce everything he knows, so he knows how Bruce fights and thinks. So every time they come into conflict, it's always a battle of wits. There's also the added element that Ra's sees Bruce as a potential son or son-in-law, constantly wanting Bruce to take his place, so there's a level of respect between the two, which keeps the conflicts fresh and interesting. Up next, we got Batman's first reoccurring villain. No, it's not the Joker. No, it's not Bane. It's not Killer Croc. It's no one like that. Is this guy. This Bond villain looking dude. This guy is named Hugo Strange. He is a very smart, very capable scientist who is often depicted running Arkham Asylum. He's the type of villain who runs things behind the scenes. He pulls strings and makes sure things go according to plan. He's actually one of the first characters within the Batman comics to figure out Batman is Bruce Wayne. Which, I mean, if you really think about it, it's not too hard to figure out. Hugo Strange is one of those characters who manages to look incredibly smart while look incredibly intimidating. Like I said, he's a puppet master. He knows how to manipulate situations to his advantage. And whenever he goes up against Batman, it is a clash of intellect and Batman trying to figure out who's behind the scenes operating this whole elaborate plan. I don't think that was a very coherent sentence, but I think you get the idea. It's sad that Hugo Strange doesn't get his chance to shine much, but whenever he's in a story, he brings a presence with him. Up next, we have Clayface. Now, Clayface isn't necessarily the smartest speck of dirt in the cornfield. What? Who says that? Clayface isn't really a smart guy per se, but he does challenge Batman's intellect in that he's a shapeshifter. It makes it more interesting when Batman has to actually figure out where Clayface is and who he's impersonating. And whenever Batman first meets Clayface, he doesn't know Clayface is a shapeshifter. So it makes for a really engaging story where Batman has to figure out what the mess is going on. Clayface allows Batman to really dig into his world's greatest detective shtick, trying to figure out where Clayface is, who he is, and what he's planning to do next. Shapeshifters cause you to doubt your senses, so Bruce has to rely on his deductive skills rather than his sight and his hearing. Plus, it doesn't hurt that Basil Karlo specifically has evolved into a really good character in the recent years, reforming and being a superhero rather than a supervillain. And I say Basil Karlo because there's like 15 Clayfaces now, apparently. Although the only memorable ones are the first two. At least for me. I mean, there was a female Clayface. There's one that looks like a freaking alien. Oh, and then apparently there's a Clay thing. Why do Batman writers really like Clayface? He's not really the most special character, but like he works. I mean, you don't see like 15 iterations of the Penguin or 15 iterations of Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is Mr. Freeze. Clayface should just have like two of them or 3 at most. Nah, they got like 6. Why? Going back to the smart villains, we're going to talk about Mad Hatter. This man specializes in the mind. You wouldn't really think that considering he's named after an Alice in Wonderland character, but besides the whole obsession with a girl named Alice and the book Alice in Wonderland, He's actually really cool. He develops mind control technology, which means he can manipulate people's minds. And the best use of him is to manipulate people's minds in order to see what their deepest, darkest desires is. He can really cause psychological torture to people's minds. So whenever he shows up in a story, it's really cool to see how they incorporate mind control. And in my personal opinion, the best use of the Mad Hatter is in situations like what they did in the episode Perchance to Dream in Batman the Animated Series. Up next, we got a character who would probably be the least likely character to be one of Batman's smartest foes, and that character is Bane. Bane is actually kind of similar to Batman in a few ways. He was orphaned at a young age and had a frightening encounter with bats. He's incredibly intelligent and also knows his way around a fight. Bane is a great villain because of his versatility. There's a good chance Bane could just be a muscle for another villain, or he could be the puppet master behind everything. When Batman fights Bane, it is a war on multiple fronts. It is not only a battle of muscle, but it is a battle of minds. Batman has to outsmart Bane while trying not to get crushed by his overwhelming strength. There's also the bonus that Bane's character adds a commentary on addiction. He uses drugs to increase his strength. And there's story arcs where he loses that venom and he becomes incredibly obsessed and goes through withdrawals. So his character also provides the opportunity to provide commentary on that, as well as be a very big challenge to Batman. Now it's time for the lightning round. Basically, these are just characters I didn't have time to write full paragraphs on, and they didn't really fit into any of these categories. And we're going to start off with Two-Face. Now, I think Harvey Dent is one of the most interesting characters in Batman's rogues gallery. He started out as a very close friend to Bruce and ended up in a horrible accident that caused his other personality, which is much more evil, to come out. Two-Face is the prime example of why you shouldn't be so close to Bruce, because everyone around Bruce eventually suffers, and also his dueling personalities really provide for a compelling character. Up next, we got Poison Ivy. She's basically just a plant activist who managed to have plant powers and is also incredibly attractive so she can seduce men. That's about the extent of her character in my eyes. There's nothing really too special about her. I mean, I guess it's good that she protects plants, because we need plants to survive, but she's a little overboard. She's like if the Lorax was a redhead woman who was a little too murdery. Next one! Alright, we got Man-Bat. Man-Bat, I think, is a really good character as well. Think of the lizard from Spider-Man, but a bat. Kirk Langstrom is a very good guy. He does what he does to help other people. He researches for cures. He does all kinds of stuff, but an accident, a lab experiment actually caused him to turn into this giant monstrous bat. So they struggle between him and the bat and trying to help Batman, but also kind of struggling with this monster inside of him. Provides for another compelling character and also another Batman copycat, I guess. Shoot, I should have included him in that category. Oh, too late for that now. Next one. Up next, we got KG Beast, popularized by the show Arrow. He's a really good character in that show, but outside of that, he hasn't gained much popularity. He is one of Batman's most capable villains, though. He has really great fighting skills, so much so that Batman opted not to fight against him and chose to trap him instead, so he wouldn't have to fight him. KG Beast is one of those villains that looks a little too over-designed, but still kind of awesome, while also posing a very great threat, and is an interesting character outside of his costume persona, especially with the media in TV shows and movies. Well, I guess not Batman versus Superman. He's just the dude that Batman just straight up murdered. But besides that, he's a pretty good character. Up next, we got Killer Croc. Killer Croc is just kind of like the lizard part of the lizard with no Kurt Connors. Deep down, he's genuinely not that bad of a guy, but the monster inside of him kind of keeps coming forward, and he keeps having these desires to eat people or whatever. But past that, he's kind of got this sad story where he's ridiculed for this rare skin condition, and that kind of causes him to go insane. He's a good character. He looks cool. Provides a good threat for Batman to face. But besides that, he's kind of like a stupid crocodilian Bane. Up next, we have The Ventriloquist. The Ventriloquist is a personal favorite of mine just because of the animated series. In that show, Arnold Wesker is a very sympathetic character, and the show really makes you feel sorry for him, while also making you understand why he's so attached to Scarface, who is his other personality that keeps him enslaved. It's very engaging to watch, and it's really fun to see the mob scenes that Scarface is a part of while being very attached and very empathetic towards Arnold Wesker as a character, just because he's not a big physical guy. He's a very wimpy guy who's just slave to his own personality, and it's a really engaging character to watch on screen. Next, we got Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, something on Tuesday, until he died on Saturday. Solomon Grundy is one of those characters which could have just been a Hulk ripoff, but in recent years, especially in the Justice League TV show, he became a very sympathetic character. He's basically just some mob boss who is somehow brought back to life and now genuinely just wants to do good, but he's still very emotional. Acts almost like a child, because realistically he kind of is, the whole Solomon Grundy born on a Monday type thing. He's very child-minded, but also really wants to do good, and in the Justice League animated show, he actually sacrifices himself. He builds a very touching bond with Hawkgirl, and it is one of the most sad deaths in a cartoon that I've seen. Past that, they haven't really expanded his character, but I do really like Solomon Grundy's design and his appearances in Justice League and his episode in Justice League Unlimited. Up next, we got Victor Zsasz, a serial killer who tallies his body every time he gets a kill. He's a very creepy character and a very unhinged character, almost Joker-esque, but not quite to that level. I think he's a very fun villain to watch. He's almost like a crazy version of Hannibal Lecter without the cannibalism. But past that, there's really not much to say about him other than he's very creepy and he's very entertaining to watch. Up next, we got Penguin, who is very overrated in my opinion. I think he has a pretty neat design, and I like the fact that he's just a simple businessman who does shady things, especially how he's portrayed in the Justice League cartoon. But past that, there's really nothing special about him. He has no real juxtapositions or thematic ties to Batman, and his Batman the Animated Series appearances were a little underwhelming. But past that, I think the eccentric personality and the businessman part of him is really interesting to watch. And in the show Gotham, they kind of show the rise of the Penguin, which I think is far more interesting than him as a crime lord. Next is the Calendar Man, who at face value seems like a completely ridiculous character, but the way they reimagined him in the Batman Arkham games, I think is the perfect way to use him. More of a Hannibal Lecter type character who's just obsessed with these dates and kind of gives cryptic clues based on what holiday it is. That is really engaging and really kind of spooky to witness. But outside of that, his original costume's a little goofy but well designed, and his character isn't really developed much. He's a very joke character, and I don't mind that too much. Next we have Firefly, who I'm a big fan of just watching fire on screen, and I think fire is a very intimidating threat for characters, so I obviously gravitate towards Firefly as a villain, but he's not a very engaging character. He's just kind of a pyromaniac who likes setting things on fire and has become kind of a mercenary. Apparently he became the sidekick to Killer Moth, which is a little interesting, but not really engaging. So I like him because of his whole shtick that he lights things on fire. He's Firefly or whatever. His costume's a little neat, but a little bland at the same time. And his character isn't really that interesting enough to actually warrant a place in the A-team of Batman's Rogues Gallery. Next we have Kite Man, popularized by all the memes people make out of him and joke around and goof with him. But in recent years, especially with, I think it was the War of Jokes and Riddles storyline in the comics, which I've skimmed over, Kite Man has developed into a really sympathetic character that you can really identify with, and I think that's the direction they should go in with Kite Man. But outside of that, I think he's fine as just a joke character who's obsessed with kites, and that's his whole shtick. I think that's fine. I think his character in The Wars of Jokes and Riddles is much more engaging, much more sympathetic, kind of just an out-of-luck guy who's trying to get by in life, and he just knows how to make hang gliders and kites. That's an engaging character for me. And the joke characters, I like joke characters. I identify a lot with joke characters. So I tend to gravitate a lot towards joke characters, and Kite Man's probably one of my favorites, especially because of the jokes and the goofs people have with him. Next we have Clock King. Clock King is another jokey character, but in media they've kind of revamped him and made him a little more engaging of a character. In Batman the Animated Series, he managed to have a device that slows down time and stuff like that, which made him a much more of a threat. And also his design in that show was pretty cool for clocks. And in the Arrowverse, he is a very engaging character. He does crimes because he's trying to help his sister. He has this scrawny yet intimidating-ish look, and his whole shtick isn't that he does things with the clocks. He's just very good at keeping time, and he's very strategic and very by the books on this is how we're going to do things. He's a lot more objective oriented, and I feel like that's more of an engaging character for a guy called the Clock King, not someone who dresses up as a clock and look, I know how time works, because we all do. We all know that. I think Clock King is a very underused character that, when developed, could be a very engaging character and could at least be a part of the B team for Batman. But as of right now, he's more C tier just because comics haven't done much with him, and in media they've done some stuff with him that warrant him not being a part of the D team or anything lower. I'm not really sure why I'm classifying these into tiers or whatever, but he's definitely not an A team, definitely not a backup player you want to bring, but he's an engaging enough character when done right, but when he's not, he's just kind of a joke character. Last guy on my rapid fire round is Condiment King, the best character. Everyone loves him. He's the most well developed. He's clearly the best Batman villain. Like, if you think Batman villains, you think Condiment King. Like, not stupid clowns or anything like that. It's the Condiment King. Obviously, I'm joking. The Condiment King is a joke character, clearly made as a joke character when he was first created. And, yeah. He's not a good villain. I think the charm of the Condiment King is that he is a joke character. He was first created by the Joker as just a guy dressed up as the Condiment King, a part of his joke posse or whatever, where the Joker was taking revenge on comedians, and this guy was like, oh, I'll just be the Condiment King. It was funny. He's a funny character, and I think as his characters kind of developed, at least his costumes, he's become visually funny, visually engaging, and he's one of those characters I look forward to seeing in movies and TV shows and even comic book panels whenever I actually look at comics, just to get a good chuckle out of me. Now, before we wrap this up, I think I need to cover one last villain. You know him, you love him, he's the biggest, the baddest Batman villain ever, quite possibly the best villain ever, and that villain is obviously Polka Dot Man. No, I'm not joking. We're going into this. We're friggin' going into this. Polka Dot Man. It's the Joker. I'm not even gonna try to play this out as a bit. It's the Joker. So we all know it's the Joker. So let's just kind of get into his little thing and then go home and you know. So we all know it's the Joker. The Joker's the best Batman villain, probably the greatest villain of all time. But what makes him the best contrast to Batman out of every other character we just talked about in however long this video is? The Joker is essentially the polar opposite of Batman. How, you ask? How is a clown the polar opposite of a bat? Well, when you look at it, it might not be clear. You would think, well, maybe a bird would have been a better choice for the opposite of a bat. Well, that's where you're wrong, kiddo. You see, Batman is the agent of order and control. He represents truth and justice, where Joker is the agent of chaos. And he is the agent of destruction, of unpredictability, of unstableness, of an unstable society. We know where Batman came from. He has a finite origin we can go back on and say this is why he acts the way he does. But the Joker just kind of spontaneously appeared. We have like 5 different origins for him. We now think there's 3 different Jokers. He just kind of appeared, and now we just speculate on where he came from. Batman takes his work seriously. This is serious work to him, while the Joker is just out here having fun. Every minute he's out there committing crimes. He has the big grin on his face, laughing the entire time. He is having fun, killing people, robbing people, whatever he's doing, trying to copyright fish. Batman doesn't kill people. That is his one rule. He absolutely refuses to kill people, absolutely refuses to use guns. While the Joker loves killing people. He uses guns, and he also can't be stopped unless he is killed, unless he's put down for good, so he doesn't kill anyone ever again. Batman studies the habits and the morality of his villains, but the Joker is random. He has no morality. He's unpredictable, like I've said, which clashes with Batman. Joker is the perfect foil to Batman because they can't exist without each other. Batman stands for one thing, while Joker's life is a direct contradiction of that moral. They're always at a constant game, one that Batman can't win and the Joker doesn't want to end. And that's what makes the Joker Batman's greatest villain. If you look at all the other rogues galleries of other superheroes, there aren't many that have this abundance of villains that are not only interesting characters, but also pose a challenge to one of the hero's core ideals, values, or personalities, thematically or otherwise. Not many heroes are able to claim this many engaging characters as villains. From Bane to the Clock King, Batman's villains are iconic in the never-ending sea of supervillains desperately trying to claw to the top to get recognition for just 5 minutes. Batman's villains are iconic, they are memorable. A lot of them have great characters and personalities to them that are very engaging to audiences, and I think that's what makes Batman's Rogues Gallery the best out of any other superhero. Hey, thanks for watching through this entire video with me. As you can tell by the backgrounds, I've been recording this day and night. Oh shoot, that didn't do that right, did I? Anyway, the point is that this took a little while to make, so I'd appreciate it if you showed me some love by hitting that like button or leaving a comment down below saying, hey, this wasn't actually too bad, I could tolerate this. And if you think you could tolerate a couple more videos from me, hey, hit that subscribe button, wait a couple more months, maybe I'll make another video. I don't know, this is just something for me to just kind of sit down, chill out, and talk about movies and whatnot. So if you into that, also hit that subscribe button and wait for a couple of months so I can talk some more movies stuff to you. That was very poor grammar, but I don't care. I'm a little sleepy, so you know what? I'm gonna send it back to you, morning me. Hey, thanks, night me. Couldn't have put it any better myself. Thank you for joining me for tonight. Or today's entertainment, I guess. See you next time.